Our next speaker is Andrew von Zuben of Bedrock and Brambles. I met Andrew, I don't know how many years ago now, 7 or 8 years ago maybe, and I bought chickens from him. He has some great chickens, by the way, golden laced Wyandottes and hardy birds, and he's got this great homesteading setup by Etherium. And he's here with his 3 children today who are they're amazing themselves. They're little entrepreneurs. They know all kinds of cool things about homesteading. They could probably put us all to shame in here, no joke. And I asked Andrew, when he was in our store a while back, will you come and speak? I believe in you. I know you got so much information and knowledge you can share. And he's also their family has a great story to share as well. And I'm going to leave it at that because he needs time to talk, right? So, Andrew, please come on up. I'm going to close this for you, okay? Get this out of your way.
Hello, everybody. I used to do a lot of public speaking.
Do you want this one or that one?
I'm going to take this one.
Sure.
I used to do a fair bit of public speaking. I haven't in about 4 years, so I'm super nervous, just so you know.
You can sing too.
I'm also a little worried that I might be a little bit wordy, so we'll see. I didn't want to be 20 minutes for a half-hour speech, but this might be longer. Anyways, I want to mention something about the chickens right away that Mark had mentioned. Talking about buying, there's a lot of diseases. He mentioned about how chickens are often sick. Your chickens should never be sick. You should never have sick chickens. What tends to happen, there's a lot of respiratory diseases that are going around. So as a best practice, you should only ever buy chicks, like day-old chicks, or really young pullets. Or if you're going to buy larger pullets or ready to lays, they should really be coming from a hatchery, somewhere that's certified. We sell chicks a little bit. We mostly sell 8-week-old pullets, and we, as a policy, don't sell mature birds at all. So you're basically, if you, for example, someone's got some cool chickens and they're mature and you're like, oh, that's really awesome, and you bring them into your flock, the chances of you bringing something in are really, really high. So just try to stick with the pullets and the chicks and don't think that sick birds is a normal thing. But because if your birds are sick, then it's no fun to see your birds suffering. I'm going to do this. I want to do a quick survey because we're going to talk about homesteading. Who here is already homesteading? Lots of people already homesteading. Who here really wants to homestead? About half and half. Okay, I'm not surprised. We're going to talk a bit about all of that. First, I'm going to tell you a bit about myself and my homesteading journey. So at my homestead, we speak to a lot of people about homesteading and about their journey. And I'll always ask, how come what's brought you to this? And people so often, maybe they've just lived like a normal mainstream life, and all of a sudden maybe there's been an illness in the family, that's actually mostly what's happened, either like a major loss or an illness, cancer, and they ask themselves, why did I get cancer? And then they start learning about all the things that cause cancer and all the chemicals in our food, and it really, really pushes people to make a lifestyle change. And so one of our roles we play as a homestead is we help people understand what homesteading is about and how they can get into it, because making the jump from not homesteading to homesteading can be intimidating. So, but everyone's got a different story. And my story may be a little bit different than the people that I talk to mostly. Most of the people that I talk to, it's fairly new to them. We kind of just fell into it. But I grew up middle class, just outside of Peterborough. I grew up on Shamong Lake. It was kind of a rural, farmy area, but my family wasn't. We didn't farm at all. But I did really, spend a lot of time on the lake fishing as a kid and exploring. And me and my friends, we'd always be in the woods, and we'd be building forts and little fences and little homesteads and things like that. Looking back at that, I don't know if you've ever thought about how we love a campfire, and anyone who burns wood here, I've been burning wood for 20 years, and the novelty never wears off, because there's something ancient that we're attracted to. There's an instinct that we have inside of us that draws us. And I personally think that the homesteading life, the agricultural life, is very similar. It has there's something ancient and instinctual in us that draws us towards it. And we don't always find that right away, but I think we all have it inside of us. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what brought me up to this area and into homesteading. And you're going to notice that how each of these steps kind of help give me the tools that I needed to do it. So one of the things that started me out really early was a book called 5 Acres and Independence, which I brought. But does anyone know that book? Yeah, it was printed in 1935. Okay, it was printed in 1935. It's basically a homesteading manual, old school, right? And so this book belonged to my grandfather, and I think he got it from a man that he used to help, who was kind of a mentor, and that man was in the military. And so 5 Acres and Independence was written in 1935, but it was reprinted again in 1945 to give to the soldiers who were returning from the war. And what the book is basically, like I said, it's a homesteading manual, but it is a very comprehensive manual on how to take 5 acres and turn it into a small farm business that will help support you and give you a great lifestyle. And, with the work that Andrew's doing, I can see, this, like I said, this has been going on that's what the intention of this book was to give these men something to root themselves into. And that says a lot of what homesteading does for us. So I had this book kicking around when I was a kid, and I'd flip through it and get kind of excited. But I eventually, I was kind of a mainstream guy. I went to school in Peterborough. I did a lot of fishing and camping growing up, so really outdoorsy. But I ended up in the restaurant industry in Peterborough. Anyone know what the restaurant industry is like? It's a little rough, right? So anyways, it wasn't the best place for me to be at the time. But what it did do is it taught me about food. And I got to work in great restaurants. And the restaurants, my first restaurant that I ever worked in, it was 100% like Mediterranean food, like Moroccan and everything. And everything was right from scratch. So it was the first time. And, I grew up middle class. The food was, we had garlic powder in the house, but I'd actually never, until I worked in that restaurant, I'd actually never seen garlic, like actually peeled garlic. It was one of my first jobs, and this is garlic, wow, So what a fabulous experience. And homesteading, it is one of the big things about homesteading is the food, right? That's part of it. So I worked 7 years in the industry, and like I said, it was pretty rough. And but I learned an awful lot about food, became a foodie, really into great food. And also having a lot of creativity with the food, being able to do different things. In a lot of my roles, I was responsible for coming up with specials, which would not be just like a usual menu item on sale, but like, the soups or the sides that you'd have to come up with. So I learned a lot of creativity when it came to preparing food. When I was in my early 20s, I spent several months half a year in Serbia and Macedonia, in former Yugoslavia. I was in my early 20s, and I was traveling there with my girlfriend. My girlfriend's mother was Serbian, and so we went to visit the family, and we actually lived in Kosovo Polja, and I lived in Skopje for a while as well, in Macedonia. And in Serbia, in particular, like where we were, Kosovo Polja was like it was like a suburb, and so I think the housing plots were like there's a bunch of little houses all together. Basically, everyone had a little house, and a little yard, and they're all it's like checkerboard kind of thing, and everyone's got fenced in between. And there's Pristina there, and it's like an urban center, and the Kosovo Polja is like the suburbs. Within the suburbs, everyone's got I wouldn't say everyone has chickens, but everyone's doing pigs. Everyone's got gardens. Everyone's kind of homesteading on. It's about the size of this room actually. Like the properties were about the size, right? And they grew quite a bit of what they needed on that property. They didn't have a big grocery store, and this is new to me, right? Witnessing all of this. So they're doing what they can with what they have. Like I remember one of my jobs there, because I was working to help them out. I spent an afternoon straightening nails. So they had an old dog house, and I was pulling nails out of the dog house and smashing them, straight again so that they could be reused, which, for me, this is in the 90s. It seemed kind of crazy, but that was the fact of they're resourceful people. They're reusing things, making the best of what they had. And it's not that they were poor necessarily. It wasn't. They didn't do that because they were impoverished. They did it because it made sense, right? To reuse those items and not be wasteful. So they had a very simple but very productive lifestyle. And the one thing I learned about the Serbians in particular is that they're very, joie de vivre, like how much they appreciate life because of the conflicts that have happened over the years there. They really value what's most important to them, and that's family and food. It all centers around family and food. So they're really, really hard workers, but they don't overwork. You know what I mean? Like, they get things done, but they make sure they take their time with their families and enjoy each other's company. And that made a big impact on me. We'd always also traveled out to the outskirts of these and some of the old villages, and that was homesteading. That's how they lived. Small places, they had, like the dachas, they'd have bees and goats and chickens, and there are goats everywhere. There's goats everywhere, So a few people had cattle. They weren't too common, but someone actually one of the kind of suburban places, someone did have a cow in a little barn and in the lot, right? Totally unheard of for us. Anyways, this it was a big impact on me, and it really stayed to me. It also really fed into some of the things that I already kind of got into with these books I found as a kid and some of my own instincts. So I returned back to the city life in the restaurant industry. It honestly got to a point where it was so dirty and rough and taking me nowhere. I had to get out. And I actually remember the moment where I was working at like this. It was a penthouse, top floor, super swanky restaurant. I had a nice chef's jacket. It was all embroidered with my name and everything on it. It was great. But I remember looking outside because it was windows all the way around, and I'm just wishing I was outside. And I what? I want to work outside. So there's a longer story here. The restaurant actually got torched, so it wasn't doing well, and one of the several owners lit it on fire. And so guess who was the last one to close the kitchen that night and did the alarm? Yeah, it was brutal. Anyways, I didn't have a job after that. Because I was the last guy, though, I got my back pay because no one wanted me blabbing, right? So anyway, I got a job pretty quickly. I was well known in the community, and I got a job right away, but it was dishwashing. So I was sous chef in this restaurant with a fancy jacket, and then all of a sudden I was going back to dishwashing, and it broke my heart to do that. So I'm like, I can't do this. So I got on the job search website, and I looked for anything outside of the city, and I found 2 jobs. One was for a handyman in Gellert, and one was for a marine assistant at a marina on Mississauga Lake. So I went up there and I applied for the job at the marina because I grew up on the lake and I had some experience. So they took me on as an apprentice. I didn't have any experience as a mechanic. They were pretty quick to hire me. Had a lot to do with there were no spelling mistakes on my resume, and the boss was a bit tense. Anyways, they just needed some. In hindsight, they needed someone with a pulse that was willing to learn. So they took me on, and then, anyway, that was a big deal for me, right? Because it got me out of the city, and what it also got me was a better financial position than what the restaurant industry was ever going to give to me. It was a real trade that I with a real potential, not right away, but a potential good wage, and then that would give me the chance to get a mortgage. It also gave me a lot of skills that were required for homesteading, because as a marine mechanic, you need to know a lot of different stuff. So in the restaurant industry, I got exposure to food. And then as a marine mechanic, I got exposure to fixing things and working on engines. So I worked at the marina for about 3 years, and then about that point, I was able to qualify for a mortgage. Not a big one, mind you, but $125,000 was what I was. And this is a kind of an important number because I'm going to talk a little later about how things have changed, even in that amount of time. So $125,000. Started to look for a place and something cheap nearby that I could find. And so we looked at a few places, and everything was pretty rough. And then someone who I was working with said, I think my neighbor's going to sell his place. Why don't you go talk to him? So I did, and it was down Salmon Lake Road, and we had actually been looking down like back roads, and I remember going by Salmon Lake Road and like, oh, it's too rough down there. I'm never going to move down there. But anyways, sure enough, this is on Salmon Lake Road. So we go down and I check this place out, and it's amazing. It's like a Peterborough kit house kind of thing, and it's in the woods, about 2 kilometers off the main road. We knew we wanted dogs, and we knew we didn't want to be right on the highway. It barely had running water. It didn't at the time have a toilet in the house. It was an outhouse only, kind of affair. But it was nice inside. It had a lot of wood, and it also had outbuildings, and there was also land. It was a 25-acre parcel with a creek and a pond for $100,000. And so it was the cheapest thing I could possibly find at the time to move into. So it was instantly, yes, this is it. And you have to understand, we're not looking at homesteading yet, right? I just wanted something cheap that was close to where I was working. So in 2006, I married my late wife, and we built to get ready for the wedding. I built a lawn. Anyone lawn crazy here? Who's lawn crazy? Oh yes. So I got lawn crazy, and I built my lawn from scratch. I prepared it all, and I bought the seed. And I remember vividly looking at it one day, and it's like, oh, it's still not coming up. And I got closer, and I got down, and looked at it, and I could see green, like this velvet. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's coming up. And it was dry that year, and I cared for that lawn, and it was beautiful. And it was a beautiful lake from scratch. And we're talking Salmon Lake Road. We're on like rocks and sand and bedrock. And I brought in, this fill and some topsoil and built this beautiful, beautiful lawn. So anyways, so part of our plans at that point were, so we got married that year, built the lawn, and did some other things, and that was great. And then the next year, during that winter, it was like, we should get some gardens. Okay, we're going to do some vegetable gardens. So in the spring, we get out there, and where are we going to put the vegetable garden? Where's the best place for the vegetable garden? And we're looking around. Well, we want to have full sun. We want to have full sun. We want it to be near the house. Yeah, right in the lawn. So we dug out the lawn. And it was our first major garden. It was a traditional garden. Because there wasn't a lot of soil there, I collected soil from another part of the property. Like everyone else understands what it's like up here, there's not much, so we just scraped it from around where we could and filled it in. So it's a kind of a deep soil garden that we continually add to. It's shaded out now by trees that we want to keep, so we're going to be using it for shade tolerant plants. But and so the next step, of course, we went to the Kinmount Fair in 2008. And we were checking out the animals, and we were checking out the chickens. And we liked the ones with the furry feet, the little furry feet. Turns out they're lousy for foraging. The ones with the furry feet, I didn't know at the time, but that's so. But we had bought the Stories Guide to Raising Chickens, and I read it like 3 times that winter. And we ordered our first chickens. And I remember I was so excited. I was so excited about getting chickens. Had never touched a chicken or been really close to a chicken, other ones at Kinmount. So they were really foreign, but we really, really, really wanted to get some chickens. So we read the book, and there is a perfect chicken for everybody, right? There's all these different breeds, but there's no one perfect chicken, although ours are pretty great. But everyone has a perfect chicken. So we shortlisted what we needed down to about 3: the Barred Rocks, the Buff Orpingtons, and the Gold Lace Wyandottes. So we ordered the Gold Lace Wyandottes, and I bugged the guy. It was Performance Poultry down at Carrying Place, and I bugged him. And I'm like, hey, how are these chickens going to be? And always sending him emails and wanting more information. And he wasn't a man of many words, and he'd just say, you're really going to enjoy them. And he was right, actually. And I tell people that now because it's true. The Gold Lace Wyandottes are a fabulous bird. So, anyways, we figured we could handle 20 birds. So we ordered 40. It's true. There's kind of 2 kinds of people in this world. There's the kind of people. I have a friend of mine, and when he went to get pigs, he knew he could handle 8, so he got 4. right, to make it easy. So I'm not saying one way is better than the other, but it's sometimes you got to just jump in and be a little more hardcore about it and see how it goes. So we got our first chicks. Straight run, 40 straight run chicks. I remember actually being surprised looking in the box. I was expecting yellow chicks, right? Little yellow puffy chicks. They weren't Gold Ace Wyandottes and all these heritage breeds. They looked like chipmunks. So they were, whoa, is that the right chicken? So, and that was right when Fern was born. Fern was born. I should actually mention that my son Oren was born the year we put the gardens in. And then Fern was born. She was actually scheduled the same day exactly that we were to get the chickens. She decided to be late, so I got a bit of time to get the chickens settled in before Fern arrived. And so, as you all know here, chickens are a gateway drug to farming, right? And that's where it starts. And that's really where it started getting heavy for us. You know, we had the gardens and the chickens. And we started making more plans, whole pile of self-sufficiency books, quite a lot of stuff people in here have read. Anyways, there's a hunt camp next door to us. And I was drinking, hanging out with the guys, and talking to a guy who had done some homesteading stuff when he was younger. And I was excited about the chickens and the gardens and some of the techniques I had learned about. And when we were done, he said, "Oh, good night." He said, "Good luck with your farm." And up until that point, I hadn't even thought about it as a farm. It was just something we were doing for something fun to do. So we kept diving into the self-sufficiency books, learned that homesteading was a thing. Like it was, we weren't online at this point, but homesteading was having kind of a resurgence, and a lot of people were into it. Homesteading and the homeschooling. So we went all in on everything that we could possibly get into homesteading-wise anyways, that we could manage. And so in 2011, I left my job as a mechanic so that we could homestead full-time as a business. And that's when my daughter Mira was born. So all my children had momentous birthdays. So we got online and joined the homesteading world. We met a couple in Gooderham. They had actually posted a little note in the post office, basically saying we're looking for like-minded people who are homesteading and homeschooling, and it was actually pretty hippie sounding, right? But a friend of ours had seen it and said, "Oh, there's this note in the store. I bet you'd want to meet those people." So anyways, we met them, and she was a blogger. And so she said, "Why don't you guys blog about what you're doing here?" And so we did. And we started a homesteading blog and posted daily for more than a year. And that's still up. So if you were looking at Bedrock and Brambles and it's on Blogger or Blogspot, you can go back and you can see some of the journey where we started. And yeah, like I said, we posted for every day for more than a year until it got too much. And so because we'd done the blog, it connected us with a whole lot more people in Haliburton. And so we started meeting more people that were like-minded in Haliburton, people that were involved in food, people who were involved in food security. And so I started becoming active in the community, promoting and developing local food security. So I got in with this little group started by Angela McGillivray, and I think it was in association with the health unit. And they had this is about the food security, right? We're trying to get people together, and they brought stakeholders together. So people like us and farmers and different people involved with food. And they say, what do we need? Like, what do we need to develop food security? What are the problems? That's what Angela was looking for. What's holding us back from local food production? So that group kind of, it didn't really go too far, but it was some good discussions. I did in that group meet David Bathe. And so David Bathe, he's up in, I guess.
Sedgwick Road.
Sorry?
Sedgwick Road.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, that's right. I couldn't remember the name. Basically, so he has some acreage up there, and they used to grow grain on the fields, and he was really interested in seeing those fields being used again. So he was interested in developing some organic grain growing, and this is an economic development project to create more economic activity in the community, as well as create more local food security. So in this little group that Angela got together, that's where I met David, and he found out that I can fabricate. I could make not just make things up, but I mean I can build things. And so he said he wanted they want to grow spelt. So anyone know spelt? Is anyone familiar with spelt? Spelt is funny. When you harvest spelt with a combine, the thresher won't pull the hulls off. So what you have to do is you have to do it separately. Oats are the same thing. When you can harvest the spelt, and then you get the grains and they've got a hull on them. But you need a special machine to take the hull off. And because spelt has been rare, the machines are rare too. So they were interested in that. So he asked me about building one for him, and then put a price together for him. Didn't end up happening, but he found out around the same time I got involved with a farm down in Douro called Maryland Organics, and I started working for him. That's a whole speech on its own. But it's one of the only organic grain farms around, and I basically traded my labor as a millwright and a mechanic, and he would pay me in grain. And at the same time, I was also able to get information for David Bathe, because David Bathe was putting together this grain CSA. So trying to get, the idea was to get local grain growers or local farmers to grow grain. The CSA, it wasn't like it's community supported agriculture. There was a membership, but the membership would buy the grain regardless of the price, basically. And the farmers would be paid a flat rate. So you'd be paid a certain amount for the number of acres you put in and not what you yielded, so that people could jump in without worrying about losing their shirts. We would be covering them and helping them get on their feet. So I got involved with that project because I had the connection to Maryland Organics. So it meant that I could, if we had questions about growing grain up our way here, and because we didn't know what we were doing, and so we had access to Maryland Organics to get us some more information. So the grain CSA was a great project. Ultimately, the problem was that we couldn't get people. First of all, people don't know how to manage just grain. So the shareholders would have the grain, they just wouldn't know what to do with it. It ended up sitting in the freezers. The farmers that were potentially interested couldn't bring themselves to use organic methods, and we were pretty strict about that. So it didn't really work out. I did end up, my role, other than just helping consult, was to do the processing. So I actually set myself up with grain processing and cleaning equipment, so that the farmer would harvest off their fields, it would go to me, I would clean the grain, which is cleaning is separating all the chaff and the grasshoppers and the small weed seeds out, so you just have the grain. So I have an old seed cleaners, Clipper 16. I just want to mention that all of that never worked out. None of that ever worked out in the end, but I still have my equipment. So if anybody was, thinking of getting into grain growing, organic grain growing in particular, I am equipped to do that processing part. I still have my equipment and my knowledge. So these small groups, I'm obviously running almost right under time already.
Keep going, man.
Okay. Just getting started. So this little group eventually became Harvest Haliburton. Does anyone know Harvest Haliburton? Okay, really important organization that went on for about 5-6 years. Still up, not necessarily active. So I'm just going to read some of the successes of Harvest Haliburton. So Harvest Haliburton is like a food council or food policy council. It's a bunch of stakeholders all together. There was me representing small-scale agriculture. Abbey Gardens was on the committee as well. The health unit was basically leading it. Tourism, HCDC were involved. We had 4 tiers in the municipality. We had the farmers market, the farmers association, and more. So really great representation. It took a lot of years to get to this point where we had that level of representation on this committee. And as far as committees go, anyone who's been on a committee know that they tend not to be very productive. We got a lot done. Because we had so much input from stakeholders, and because we were so passionate about what we were doing and so determined to see this through, that we got a lot done. And it is all on the website. So if you go to Harvest Haliburton's website, it's still up. There's all the tabs along the top. You drop down those menus, and there's all the work that we did. And it's all really important stuff that's still applicable. So I'm just going to highlight some examples. So we produced 3 films to highlight agricultural reform and development in Haliburton. A lot of notable faces in those films. Those films are on the website. You go at the bottom of the front page. They're down there. Really great, professionally done films. We conducted a community food assessment. We developed a planning document written especially for municipal planners to ensure needed agricultural reforms were included in the official planning process. We developed research and documentation to help municipalities implement appropriate backyard chicken regulations. We researched mobile abattoirs, egg grading stations, put together a list of available community commercial kitchens, and also created a manual to facilitate agreements between the community kitchens and users. And what this was, there's all this, small-scale producers want to produce a product to sell. You need to produce that in a commercial kitchen, but commercial kitchens are expensive. We have all these commercial kitchens all throughout the area, and they're underutilized. So what this is a method. So there's a directory and a manual, so that you can find a kitchen that's close to you, and there's information on how you can have a relationship with that community kitchen, so that there's no hard feelings. So we had all these projects. And probably the best one was the planning document, because it's like planning is this horrible language that nobody understands. We hired a consultant to write this book. So everything that all the stakeholders wanted to see changed in official planning and how the municipality goes forward, we were able to create this document to give to planners and say, here's the information, completely primary, secondary research, all written by planners in language you understand. And as soon as those official plans get opened up, you can implement these actions. And that leads to changing regulations, which is super important. I'd have to say, so the work of Harvest Haliburton culminated in a large and successful event. So we'd always wanted to get everybody in the same room. And honestly, everyone's Haliburton, everyone's kind of fighty and in silos. Not everyone gets along, especially a lot of these groups, not everyone agreed with each other. We were able to finally get, after 5 years, everyone into the same room, politicians from throughout Ontario, and it was amazing. And we really got people together. And by that point, we'd done just about everything that we could, because at this point now, we're waiting for those official plans. COVID delayed it, Doug Ford delayed it, and we need those official plans opened up so that we can change the regulations, because the regulations are a major problem as far as I am concerned, and I'm sure everybody here understands that too. So that's where we're at there. So I'm a homesteader. What does that mean? So it typically conjures images of living off-grid on some land, away from the big cities, growing gardens, and caring for farm animals, and raising homeschooled children who help make soap and fresh bread. Right? So, the first homesteaders of our culture were the Europeans in the 19th century. These are people who are in Europe, and they, land is expensive, and maybe they don't have the class to even buy land. They can't be landowners, and the New World is being opened up at this point. So, this is all of a sudden an opportunity for people to go from, a place where they can't grow. They can't grow big families. They can't be entrepreneurial. They can't have land and grow food, and so they have these limited prospects of owning land, but the New World offered them the opportunity for this new self-determined life. So that was kind of the original homesteading. So they would come over here. They would be given some land in most cases. They wouldn't necessarily know what that land was like, right? But it was basically free for them. All they had to do was get it cleared off in 5 years, I think, and start building on it, and it was theirs. So that's the traditional version of homesteading. I'm going to say 20 years ago when I started, this is a bit of a tangent, but 20 years ago when I started rural properties were more widely available. So when I used to talk about homesteading was very possible. You just had to move somewhere like Guthrum or Cardiff or Maynooth, and you could get some cheap land. You couldn't afford land, couldn't afford a house or something near the cities, but you can get a cheap land. But with the pandemic and another back to the land movement, owning land has become more of an elusive dream. So we're almost at this point again, like the Europeans were, where opportunities have pretty much dried up. So like I said, when I started out, there was opportunities. Now that's becoming extremely difficult. So that the opportunities for young people to get into homesteading, or anyone to get into homesteading, are now more of a dream, like more of an expensive dream. But I want to define homesteading a little more carefully. So the 19th century settlers, so they couldn't choose their land. They had to make use with what they had. And that's true more than ever. You don't have a lot of choice. And so you almost have to work with whatever you can find, whatever you can get. So I want you to consider homesteading not as a physical act, but as an ideology, as an approach to life and living. So, and the reason I want to talk about that is because we all can't get to that point where we want right away. If you want to get on some land and want to start getting some animals, and it's simply not possible because it's simply too expensive. But that doesn't necessarily mean what homesteading is. You can actually homestead from the point of it being an ideology before that. So homesteading to me is settling down, like the settlers, right? They settled. And it's not just settling down and putting down your roots. It's settling for what you have. It's settling for where you are in your life. And there's a comfort to settling down because you've arrived where you are. This is where I am at. This is what I have. This is either the land I have, or maybe this is the apartment I have. This is where I'm at. Can I settle here? And so you've arrived because the homesteading project isn't necessarily a goal-oriented project. It's a way of life. And this is important to keep in mind because the fast pace of the projects that you can put in place when you're homesteading, there's also going to be setbacks and things that slow you down, and responsibilities accumulate. So you're not always going to be able to get to those goals. And what I'm saying is that homesteading isn't necessarily a goal-oriented exercise. And so this mindset is critical to making this kind of life sustainable long-term. So ultimately, you need to consider homesteading as a multi-generational plan. And so that comfort of homesteading isn't necessarily just achieving the lifestyle. It is accepting that you've settled your circumstances as they are instead of constantly reevaluating your circumstances. It's like the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, right? We always fall into it. You're looking at what you want. I want this piece of property, and I want to have fields, and I want some barns, and I want some animals, and you might get there. And then you realize, I wouldn't mind being somewhere where the soil's a little bit deeper, maybe have a wood lot. And so if you're always in this state, because if people have often had the choice post-war here, you have this choice. And so you get into this grass is greener on the other side of the fence problem, where you're always looking for the next greatest thing. And the comfort in homesteading, in the ideology of homesteading, is that you've settled, you've arrived, and you don't need to look over the fence and see that grass because you've already set your roots down. So I'm not saying that, if you're in the apartment and you're applying your homesteading principles, to your lifestyle, and you really want land, that you shouldn't look for the land. It's just, try to be comfortable in the place you're at when you're at. So this means, again, it means adopting the homesteading ideology and practice before actually having the land to build your dreams. So, and I'm going to say this right now, homesteading isn't a solution for everyone, even if everyone wanted to homestead and had the determination to see it through. Resources are limited, and permaculture techniques aren't a perpetual motion machine. Resources are still needed and spent, and the land has a very, very limited carrying capacity to support any population, human, animal, and alike. And this is especially in our cold climate with our 3 inches of topsoil. We can't all have acres of farmland and a woodlot to keep us warm during the winter. I mean, for me, I have fuel. I have a woodlot. I can keep myself in fuel. But everyone can't do that. There's not enough trees for the whole population. And so this is another reason why we can still homestead, but we don't have to homestead in the physical way that we understand it. We can take a different approach to how we live our life wherever we are. And it really comes down to being resourceful with what we already have. So it can be community gardens, container gardening, growing microgreens, small-scale aquaponics, eliminating household food waste, vermiculture composting, learning to cook from scratch, buying products locally and in bulk, community sharing of resources, repairing broken things, sewing clothes, choosing minimalism, which is better in an urban context anyways, working close to home to avoid commuting, choosing work that accommodates a more intentional lifestyle, preparing for emergencies, homeschooling children, building relationships with people who do have land, and welcome some help. So I'm going to explore this idea of homesteading as an ideology and wherever you are at the point you're at. So homesteading is synonymous with self-determination, resiliency, and freedom, usually because that comes with being on the land. But self-determination is still just a mindset, and resiliency is something that should be a big part of your lifestyle, regardless of where and how you live. And then there's the idea of freedom. And I'm going to talk about freedom for a moment, because it really is at the heart of homesteading and a big part of what draws people to the lifestyle. And like homesteading, freedom is not simply a state of being, but a state of mind that you can control regardless of your circumstances. Being off-grid in an unorganized township on your own land with a reliable water source and farm animals and crops and seeds and energy, and even if you've disconnected from being a government citizen, does not mean you have attained ultimate freedom. You will still be subjected to circumstances beyond your control, and there will always be events that place you in that position. Freedom is the will to make strong and resolute decisions in the face of adversity. Freedom is having a well-defined set of values to help make hard decisions and find the way through moral dilemmas. Freedom is knowing what is important to you and setting clear priorities. Try not to get distracted by perceived loss of freedoms that aren't clear priorities. Freedom is having the knowledge, skills, and experience to help solve problems, big and small. Freedom is being resourceful enough to survive, regardless of your circumstance. When we dream about homesteading, we're really dreaming about freedom, because we want to be free of the rat race, industrial food, humiliating employment, noise and light pollution, political interference, high costs of living, and everything in modern life that makes us feel oppressed. The fact is that going back to the land can help with many of these issues, but not all of them. Freedom must be a state of mind because freedom must be a state of mind because freedom as a state of being is so easy to lose. So we talk about, talking about preppers. I'm a homesteader. I don't consider myself a prepper. I do tend to drift there a little bit. And with prepping, there's often talk about protecting our properties. And that usually involves firearms, tactical training, so that we can protect everything that we've built up. We can protect our family, we can protect our land, we can protect our animals. My personal opinion is that firearms actually increase your sense of fear. And if you don't have any tactical training, they're really not going to do anything to help you. And it's also, even if you are tactically trained and heavily armed and have a plan, you can still be overcome. And so then what do, right? You've lost your freedom. You've lost everything you've had. And now are you going to be able to survive? So if you take a different mindset with freedom and knowing that freedom is in your mind and that your true skills are your knowledge and your experience, and that you can take that anywhere you go without your tools, without your animals, without your land. And there's some freedom in feeling like that, knowing that you can lose everything. You could have a natural disaster that wipes out everything, and it would break your heart. But you need to know that you can carry on, and you can keep going. And so, like freedom, homesteading should be regarded as a state of mind and not as a state of being. And that means you can homestead wherever you are in life and location. Because this is important to make clear, because going back to the land has become a lifestyle choice of a fortunate few. And my own personal situation has been from good choices, but also just a lot of good luck. So that said, I don't want to bring you down too much about getting land, but I think there still are opportunities for finding land for young people. You need to have good planning with clear goals. It's still possible to make the best set of opportunities that come up. So for those of you who want to be on the land, prepare your finances, know exactly what you want, and be prepared for compromise. You may not find exactly what you want, but that's the whole point of homesteading, is settling for what you get. So, like, for example, you can get Nova Scotia, for example. You can go out to Nova Scotia and you can get land cheap out there. A friend of mine just bought a house, really nice one, for $145,000 in Pictou. But what if your family's here? So, yes, your homesteading dream is attainable on that land over there, but are you leaving your parents behind? So, that's why it's important to have your priorities very clear. And so that means you can start the homesteading mindset right away. Wherever you are and however you're living, what homesteading goals can you achieve in your present circumstances? So to use the cliche, life is a journey and not a destination. How will you choose to live? I have more.
We should probably wrap it up in the next 10 minutes or so.
Okay. I was worried about making it 20 minutes. All right. Let's
Buy the book.
It's actually funny you said that. I'm going to read a quote from the book I haven't written. Okay. The idea of farming I'm going to start talking about farming and food security. Okay. The idea of farming conjures a fairly specific scene in most minds. You know the one. It's an old diverse family farm where they grow field crops, raise a variety of livestock, and keep gardens. There's a red barn, meandering farm animals, and barley awns swaying with the breeze. The kids are healthy and rosy-cheeked as they help their parents with the chores, and the community is grateful for the hard work that's done on the farm. But most people know that the rural ideal isn't real and that agriculture has become corporate business and grows crops for commodity markets. But longing for the family farm hasn't diminished. The scene is still used to advertise on food packaging, and though Sunday drives to the relatives in the country aren't as common as they once were, there's a trend towards making the farm a tourist attraction, drawing concrete, weary city dwellers hoping to reconnect with the bucolic dream and make it tangible. And why not? Even if it's not wholly genuine, the small farm, nestled in with the community, embodies what many people see as a healthy society. We can escape the truth for a moment and linger at the farm gate, chatting about the beauty of the day and how sweet the apples are. Upon our return, we see there are problems with our communities and the environment that we depend on for our survival. The list is long and the injustice is profound, but our passion for change is diluted by the ever-present need to keep up with postmodern life. So homesteading and farming are often being compared as being mutually exclusive. I know that, personally, I think of the homestead as the precursor to the farm. So the homesteading is the beginning, where you get things up and you're only really producing for yourself and your family. And so that eventually, over time, becomes a farm that's more productive. So the homestead sustains the family, and the farm produces surplus and sustains the community. And so homesteading doesn't need to mean farming, and farming isn't usually homesteading. But this is just a bit of a meaningless line of division. Like, personally, in this community, I've run into this before, where there's farmers and homesteaders, and there's a boundary placed in between, and people don't always get along. It's unfortunate, but from this point on here, I'm going to just talk about farming, knowing that really the difference between farming and homesteading is there is no real fundamental difference for what we're talking about here. So let me tell you about my vision and picture the farm scenes that I just read out. So the traditional diverse family farm before industrial agriculture could support the farm family and 3 other families. And that doesn't sound like much, but anyone who grows food knows how difficult it can be to produce large surpluses. Today's large-scale industrial farms tend to produce for about 100 families. These are pretty loose numbers, but you'll get what I'm going for. So that means that if we have a quarter of the population on the land and growing food surpluses, we have the opportunity to provide real local food security for everybody. And so you can see all we need to do is get more people on the land and start developing small-scale surpluses that will accumulate by volume. So those not on the farm could be the craftsmen and the tradespeople who specialize and can in turn help support the farm. But the bottom line is that we need more people working on the land. I'm going to skip this part because So I'm sure everyone here understands that our communities have about 3 days of food at any given time. That's all we've got. If we run out if there's no food coming into the communities, we have 3 days and then it's over. And I think that's even an optimistic number. So there's the importance of building food production into our community, because we need to be able to mitigate any problems that happen in the vulnerable industrial system. There's another quote from my book, which I'll leave. So as you know, our location on the Canadian Shield is not suitable for large-scale agriculture as it's conducted these days. So in the beginning, there were successful farming operations, but the soil became quickly depleted, and most aspiring farmers moved out to Manitoba. Where we are, we're in Cavendish Township. The soil is so poor, the land is so poor for farming that it's almost all Crown land. It was never distributed to settlers because they couldn't even pawn it off of them. So my lot personally has never been farmed. It's never been homesteaded. There was a dairy farm down the road from me, but it was just there to support a logging camp, like a sawmill camp, and they had animals and did dairy and some. But as soon as the logging camp was done, the farm was done too, and it was gone, and the soil was absolutely terrible. But it doesn't mean that we can't go back to these small-scale, diverse family farms. I'm going to skip all of this stuff. So I think maybe I'll leave it there, because I've totally run out of time to talk about all this stuff here. Next time, yeah. There she goes. Anyways, what I'm basically saying is we can't go back to the way, we can't do industrial agriculture here. We can't have large farms that are producing lots of food for people. We can't have a farm that, is like one person or a little family, and they're growing food for 100 different families. It just doesn't work. The land isn't flat. The land doesn't have enough concentrated nutrition. But what we can do, because I'm sure that most people in here understand all the alternative agricultural techniques and regenerative agriculture, there's countless super cool systems that I know Andrew's already talked about a few of them, right? Like it all has to do with capitalizing on our resources and being super creative and learning as much as we can. And because one solution isn't going to work on everyone's plot of land. So what works on Andrew's property isn't necessarily going to work on my property. So we can't have this one size fits all solution. So my vision is more homesteaders, more homesteading, more small plots of land, more experimentation with different crops. And so I think that if we have enough people homesteading and growing small amounts of land, like I said, if you can support 3 other families, that's an awful lot of food. I generally think that we can easily support our community and give our community a great deal of food security. I'm going to just say one more thing. Oh my gosh. Wow. So, I can just talk about homesteaders, okay? So this will be me finishing things off here. Homesteaders, I promise. Homesteaders can be considered the pioneers of our time and a big part of many solutions. They try and they fail, and they try again to grow food to sustain their families. Homesteaders tend to keep to themselves for a variety of reasons, but they're creating soil, trying different crops, experimenting with different systems, keeping stock of heritage breeds, learning important skills, acquiring knowledge, raising families, teaching children what they learn, so that when the day comes that our current food system has failed, there will be leaders who can step in and help the community develop a local and robust food system. I'm just going to just briefly.
Also, if you have any questions, think about the questions right now.
Questions. I just want to let you know what we do on our farm here. So just so you know what we're doing, we have a website, of course, with social media going back a long ways. We've done a lot of experimenting. We're not done yet, but we've settled on chickens, goats, hugel bed gardens, herbs, fruit bushes, and blueberries, hascaps, and currants. And we do a lot of teaching. So we have we teach a lot of workshops and hold a lot of events. We breed and sell Gold Lace Wyandotte pullets. They're a dual-purpose heritage breed, perfect for homesteading on the Shield. They're cold hardy, great foragers, great companions, productive, and tough as nails. My chickens are tough chickens that live forever. We also keep a herd of Nigerian dwarf goats. They haven't been so great. The genetics are, I think a lot of these fun animals like the Highland and the Dexters, the gene pool is really shallow. And to be honest with you, even in the industrial system, they can do the AI for choosing the guy, and they always choose the best guy. So they have genetic issues in the mainstream system as well. So we're working on our goats. Fern, my daughter, she's in charge of the breeding program now, and we're going to use a bit of a combination between like proper methods, line breeding, and her own instincts and who she thinks would be good couples. And we're going to see if we can land race them. So there's myself, my son Oren, and Fern. I shouldn't have to look at the notes to figure out what your names are. So Oren has taken responsibility for the managing of our woodlot, which we're in the MIF-TIP program. He also has a lot of experience hatching chicks. Fern, of course, like I said, is working in the breeding program, so she's more or less in charge of the goats. Fern is also interested in making wood products and like rustic furniture, and she'll be setting up a sawmill this spring, and our plan is to have her brother, who's managing the woodlot, supply her with logs so that she can mill lumber and build things with her lumber. And my daughter Mir is in charge of the morning chores. The older two are a bit more teenagery and maybe don't remember everything that needs to be done. So Mir is there to make sure everything gets done. And so she's also the specialist with the chickens and the roosters. And if you visit us, you'll see that. She'll be making the decisions on our chicken breeding program. So anyways, we're hoping that if you ever want to come out to visit us, we have a lot of events. We're doing things like keeping backyard chickens. These are paid events, composting, hugelkultur, wild edible foraging, small engine care, basic welding, woodlot management, and more. But we do have a free event every Saturday. We have coffee with goats from 12:30 to 3:30. It's a free event to help us connect with the community, and it's really just an open house. So if you're interested in seeing our farm, meeting our animals, meeting the kids, we're there 12:30 to 3:30, at least until March. We'll probably reschedule then, but we'll probably continue to have that. So we'd always love to meet you.
We're almost at 8:30. Is there any questions for Andrew? Before you run off? Are we good? Yes, there's a question.
Oh, okay. So the question was, where can everyone get information on our events? So we have a website. We're actually quite easy to find. There's my name. I'm Andrew Von Zuben. We're Bedrock and Brambles. I dominate the internet space with that stuff. So all you have to Google that, and you'll get everything that there is. So we do the website. I do everything myself. That's a homesteading thing. I do absolutely everything myself, including the web design. So I'm working on that right now. But it is up, and you can find information there. You can visit us and talk to us, or you can follow us on Facebook or on Instagram. You'll see we'll be listing our events on Eventbrite and on Facebook, and also on the website.
Perfect.
Any hard questions?
How do you get the goats to drink coffee?
They love coffee. They love coffee with goats as much as anybody, because they know that day they know coffee with goats day. The dogs do too, because they got to go inside, and so the dogs cry all afternoon, and the goats are like, "It's coffee with goats day. We're gonna get treats and coffee," and they run into the little pen where we have the hosting going on. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Mark.